right, so if there are two things that I can't live without in my life, it's food and fashion. And so I'm so excited to introduce our next two panelists who come from those worlds and have a lot to say about how to create sustainable growth and success in local communities and national communities. So please help me welcome Phil Pirkovic, the Director of Brand and Partnerships at Shinola, and Zach Brooks, the General Manager of Smorgasburg, LA. All right, welcome to the stage, guys. We had a chance to hang out yesterday and we connected a couple weeks ago, but I'm super excited to get started. Let's maybe start with you, Phil, and tell us a little bit about what you do at Shinola.
Yeah, so my name is Philip Pirkovic, and I am the Director of Brand and Partnerships at Shinola Detroit. We actually have a little video. So we just filmed, hit the green one. We just filmed our very first brand spot. So this will give you a good sense of what we do.
How do you make an icon? Simple answer is, you don't. You just make something for the right reasons. Asking yourself, would you use it? Will it last? Is there any way to make it better? You steer clear of fads and trends and the latest. Building what you love in the way you believe in. And if you do all that, the things you make will find their place. So what do you call that? We call it Shinola.
Phil, are you wearing a Shinola watch today?
I am.
Oh, what a coincidence. Look at that.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know, at Shinola Detroit, we make products and experiences embodied with an unmistakable American aesthetic, design, craft quality. We started off as a watch manufacturer, but now we have a leather department, we do jewelry, we even have a hotel. So we built the first Shinola hotel in downtown Detroit about 5 years ago. And my role with the brand is to help the brand grow. So I do that through content, through storytelling, through marketing efforts, through partnerships and collaborations.
That's great. And Zach, tell us a little bit about what you do in your role at Smorgasburg.
I don't have a video. Can you make me a video like that?
We can make
I
you
need
one.
a video like that.
I'm sure people here will make you a video. Yeah.
They said, do you guys have videos? And we were both like, no, we don't have anything. And I was like, if he doesn't have anything, I won't prepare anything. And then like an hour ago, he's like, actually, I got this great video. And I'm like, what? That's not right. That's not right. So yeah, I'm Zach Brooks. I am the general manager of Smorgasburg in Los Angeles. Smorgasburg started, well, it grew out of the Brooklyn Flea, which started 15 years ago in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. It was founded by Eric Demby and Jonathan Butler, who are my bosses. It was a sort of flea market 2.0 at a time when there wasn't a million. It was one of the first sort of new school flea markets that opened, and it had a little bit of food, and the food became so popular that they spun it off into its own event called Smorgasburg, which at the time was a smorgasbord in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and that's where the name comes from. We run multiple Smorgasburgs and multiple Brooklyn Fleas in the New York, New Jersey area. In Los Angeles, we're open on Sundays in downtown LA. We're actually 75% Smorgasburg, 25% Brooklyn Flea, but we're 100% Los Angeles. When they had the opportunity to open a Smorgasburg here in LA, they hired me 8 years ago, initially to curate all the food, and then they brought me on to sort of run our operations. And I've lived here in LA, or I've lived in LA for 15 years. And yeah, now we run, we also have other Smorgasburgs now in Toronto, Miami. We do pop-up events in Brazil,
maybe
and
Detroit.
Japan as well. What?
Maybe Detroit.
I mean, that's what an unexpected connection. I like it. I like it.
Wait, Zach, what's like the best thing you've eaten all year? You must have really great food recos. Like, what's something you tried this year that was amazing, that blew your mind?
I that wasn't on the question list you gave me. You're putting me on the spot. I don't know. It's so hard. I'm actually really bad at when people ask me for restaurant recommendations and stuff. I'm terrible. It's really sad. I'm like, you need to tell me, like, you can't just say what's the best. You have to be like neighborhood kind of food. Like, you want lunch, you want dinner, how much money you want to spend. I mean, I need more data in order to.
No, we welcome Long Beach recommendations too, because neither of us are from Long Beach. So afterwards, if you have good food recommendations, please come.
See, that I can do. If you had said that, what's your favorite place in Long Beach?
Well, this is
actually, I still can't.
This
do you
is
want
your
Cambodian food? Do you want? It's hard. It's hard.
What is your favorite food in Long Beach?
I mean, I will say the one place that every time I'm in Long Beach, I cannot go to is Gusto Bakery, which is this incredible. I have begged them to come and do Smorgasburg on multiple occasions. They're amazing. If you haven't checked them out, I highly recommend it.
Now, Phil, Shinola really got its roots in Detroit, and you actually took over an old GM building for your headquarters, for one of your buildings. Tell us a little bit about that local community and how it's grown since then.
Yeah, so our headquarters is in the Argonite building, which is designed by Albert Kahn, who was a famous architect. And it was an old design center for General Motors for many, many, many years. And after GM downsized, we had an opportunity to get into the building, and we occupied like, I think 90,000 square feet in the building. So the fun fact about the building is the Corvette was designed there. So there's just a ton of kind of creative history seeping through the walls and the halls. And yeah, so we have our actual watch factories upstairs, headquarters is downstairs. And when we took it over, we were the first American watch manufacturer in the United States in the last 60 years. And to date, we've built 1.2 million watches in Detroit, and that's something that we're very proud of.
And tell us about how you've expanded your presence now to being more than just a Detroit brand.
Yeah, so a lot of what I've been working on this year is kind of bringing more awareness to the brand and doing that through kind of our content initiatives and our partnerships. So when it comes to kind of storytelling, you know, we look at it two ways, right? There's brand storytelling and product storytelling. So on the brand side, for me, it's how do I figure out ways I can authentically connect the brand to culture. So one of my biggest inspirations is Virgil Abloh, and he had this 3% rule, which he stated that to make something uniquely new, you would have to only change something by 3%, right? So that's kind of like the basis of how I approach marketing, because you need familiarity to kind of strike to the masses. So I watch a lot of Hot Ones, right? And for those of you that don't know, it's a show where celebrities eat the spicy chicken wings and they get asked a lot of questions, and it's something I just genuinely engage with. So I'm like, all right, what is Shinola's version of that, right? And you know, we threw around a lot of ideas, and we ended up coming up with this show called The Movement, where we bring celebrities into the factory and we have them build a watch while we interview them. So that's on the brand side, right? It's kind of finding threads throughout culture and associating the brand through culture that way, but also giving people a sneak peek behind what we do, and having someone else assemble this watch. And it's a very difficult thing, right? It's very nuanced, the screws, everything is so tiny. So that's how we do it that way. And on the product side, we have this series called the Great American Series, where we kind of champion and highlight people through products. So we've been able in the past to highlight Muhammad Ali, Georgia O'Keeffe, Jackie Robinson, Smokey Robinson. And what we do is we create with their estates, we create a limited edition product that we often sell at a higher price point, but proceeds from that product end up going back to those respective estates. So through brand and product, we're always finding ways to kind of tell stories about the city, but also just about things happening kind of in culture. So
now, Zach, for you, Shinola's got its start by leaning into being a Detroit brand, but Smorgasburg is kind of a national brand based on local community. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, that was the big thing when the guys who started Smorgasburg, got the opportunity to bring it to LA. One of the first things that I, was pretty clear from the beginning was that I didn't think that even though we're a known brand and there are so many people who live in Southern California who are familiar with the brand, I really felt like we couldn't just drop a New York market into the middle of Los Angeles and be like, you're welcome. Like no one wants that. No one like even though it is Smorgasburg and people know it, it was taking the model that they, did in New York and making an LA version of that. And so from the very beginning, we were focused on finding, they hired me because I lived here and was a food writer and sort of knew the community, similar to what, Han said earlier about, having where she goes to the city and, needs to live there. Like I, had lived here for, 10 years. And then we set out to find the best restaurants, like the best people, the best chefs, the people who were doing the cool things that were sort of bubbling up from the community and sort of building a market around that.
Tell me about the spaces that you activated in these communities. So where are you guys located in Williamsburg? Where are you located in LA? And how did you decide on these spaces?
Yeah, so Smorgasburg is typically it's almost always a partnership, and usually that partnership is either with a developer or like a city or a parks department or something related to government. In New York, we've done a bunch of different things. Here in LA, Smorgasburg was a partnership with the developers behind The Row, which is a large development in downtown that used to be the site of the old American Apparel factory. It had sort of was a bunch of big industrial buildings that had fallen into disrepair and weren't really being used except for the American Apparel factory. So they took it over. They turned it into mixed use, like retail, office space. They built a gigantic parking lot. And then they wanted, they set out to like lease the spaces. And we were the first sort of tenant that they brought in because they had a 100-year-old wholesale produce market that was part of the property that still operates Monday through Saturday, but it's empty on Sunday. And so they have this huge parking lot that goes unused on Sundays, and they felt like bringing us in could help bring people to this place on Sundays, on the weekends, where people normally didn't come, as they set out to sort of build this place,
And where are you looking at next? Can you tease any other locations? Or maybe what you look for in a future location?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking, but it does, our business model, we really pride ourselves on being an incubator for new businesses. Like that is, our business model is based around that. I mean, we are a for-profit company, but we're nothing without the small businesses that make up a Smorgasburg. And making Smorgasburg work for them financially is a huge part of what we do. And that is not easy. Like, real estate is expensive. Like the food business is hard. It is hard to make money. And most people look at Smorgasburg, they think of it as a food event or a farmer's market, and I actually look at it as it has more similarities to a restaurant than it does to a food event, like an event that happens once a year, or, we're open every single Sunday. There's a consistency, and the vendors, we try to create a system where they can actually make money on a weekly basis, not give out food for free or do it just for marketing, because that only works for a short amount of time. And so for us, we're always looking for locations, but it really does depend on finding that perfect partner, that perfect location, so that we don't have to put too much of a burden on the vendors. So we're open on Sundays in LA, but we have always been looking for a Saturday location in Southern California, ideally someplace that's close enough to LA that we maintain that community and everything we've built and give our vendors a second place, but far enough away that we can tap into other communities that, so, I mean, this has been a place that I've spent a ton of time in. I mean, I love Long Beach, San Pedro area, Orange County has always been a place that, but it is hard.
And Phil, I guess same question to you. Tell us where Shinola has retail locations and how you decide on where to open a new store.
Yeah, so we have 21 stores right now, soon to be 22 in the next month. And a lot of it really just comes down to just how we can, find communities where, we can have an impact. So in Detroit, when we opened up our first store, we actually restored the first Willis Jeep factory. So for us, it was like, hey, we know we needed a flagship store in Detroit. We found this property, which was the old factory that Jeep was making the Willis Jeep at. And then what we did is we partnered with Jack White, who is another iconic, famous Detroiter, and he owns Third Man Records. So we did a partnership with him where he has Third Man Records, this flagship, right next to Shinola's flagship. So we did this outside of the city. So this is in Midtown, which is about like a mile and a half outside of downtown. And the idea here was, how can we use these two iconic brands to kind of like build a hub around Midtown? And since both those stores opened, we've noticed, you know, more businesses come to Midtown and kind of, you know, just starting to develop that area of Detroit. But for us, when we think about retail, you know, our retail experience is really, really incredible, right? It's different, you know, when you go to the store and you can like touch the leather bag and touch the watch and see it. So for us, retail is very, very important. And a lot of it just comes down to like where we can find kind of good deals and have an impact.
You know, we talked earlier a little bit about storytelling and about partnerships and working with different creatives. What's a partnership or project you've worked on, Phil, that has been the most meaningful to you? Yeah,
so one of the first projects I did this year was with a local Detroit brand called Dos Jefes, and I'm actually wearing. They made these jeans for me, and they're an upcycle brand. So they take old and they make new things. So I was able to give them like 5 pair of jeans, and they turned them into these jeans. But that's kind of what they do. So I met the PJ, the founder, at this like vendor market, like on a weekend, and it was like a 2-story venue, and he was upstairs. He was the only vendor upstairs, and he had one little rack of clothes. And I walked upstairs, and I was looking at these clothes, and I was like, these are the craziest pieces I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, we need to figure out a way to work together. And so the next day, I brought him into the office. We had a meeting with our chief creative officer. And a lot of what I do is kind of be the conduit between like culture and like the corporate, right? So I spend my time outside finding, you know, creatives and brands to work with, and then it's up to me to convince, you know, the C-suite, hey, here's how we need to work with some of these brands. So with Dos Jefes specifically, we have an extensive leather program, and we make a lot of incredible bags. They've never done a bag before, so we came up with this concept to have them make 30 bags. So we gave them access to all our old liability material and like bags that like didn't pass quality control, and we gave them 60 pounds of just like old stuff, and they were able to create 30 custom bags, one of one. And it took them like 4 months, because it's literally 3 people in their studios, probably like half the size of the stage, and they're just in Hamtramck, Detroit, and they're just like sewing every single day. And over those 4 months, we had a film crew in there. We made a documentary about it, and we started teasing that documentary, and then we threw this launch event at our flagship store. And we chose not to release them online because we wanted their fans, the local community, to get first access to these things, and they sold out in like an hour. So to me, that's kind of the perfect example of like, you know, using our brand as a platform and the resources we have to, you know, not only make something that's really cool, right? We were able to create these 30 bags, all unique, all original. Each bag included, you know, parts of Shinola product into it. But also we had this event, and then with that event, we hired a local caterer company. So like all these things start to ripple pretty quickly, of just like one partnership could have so many different extensions of kind of impacting kind of local community. So
how much did you sell the bags for?
So the crazy thing is like so I think we had 3 tiers. Like we had a level at 75, a level at 200, and a level at 300. So very affordable. Very affordable. And that was part of it too. Like we wanted to make sure that people, you know, their fans, people from Detroit could actually, like, you know, we wanted the pricing to be inclusive enough where they could actually get the product.
I guess, Zach, same question for you. What's a project or partnership you've launched that you're the most proud of?
Yeah, we have a lot of community partnerships at Smorgasburg. You know, one of the ones I'm most proud of is actually happening this weekend. We have a partnership with KCRW, which is a great, you know, radio station, community radio station. And you know, they do this annual tortilla tournament as part of Good Food, the food show that's on their airwaves every weekend. And so it is a sort of bracket style tortilla tournament that pits all the best tortillas in Southern California against each other. There's like a flour category and a corn category, and they go up against each other in different rounds. And then the judges narrow them down to a final four. And the final judging happens this Sunday at Smorgasburg. And the four finalists come and give out tortillas and sell food. And then they crown a winner.
How do you get to be a judge?
What?
How do you get to be a judge?
Dude, get in line. I've been asking that question for years.
What's the prize?
The prize is, I think it's being the champion of the tortilla tournament. I think is the prize. No, I think there is a trophy that the winner gets. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very reward oriented, so I always need to know what the prize is before I sign up for something. You know, Zach, what would you say is an example of a short-term impact that Smorgasburg has made on the community versus a long-term impact? We talked about this with Han earlier in the day, but short-term versus long-term.
I don't, you know, I think I kind of think of everything as long-term. I don't know. I feel like that's so much of the food business is consistency and long-term. It's very, you know, being successful in the short term is not difficult. It's being successful in the long term, getting people to eat food over and over and over again at your restaurant. One of the things I'm most proud of with Smorgasburg is, you know, 2 years ago when the 101 best restaurants in LA list, which comes out every year, that's used to be put together by Jonathan Gold, now is done by Bill Addison for the Los Angeles Times. When the 101 list of best restaurants came out, something like 33 of the 101 restaurants had some connection to Smorgasburg, whether like incubating their business directly at Smorgasburg, or a sous chef from one of the restaurants started their own business at Smorgasburg, or maybe the restaurant had popped up at Smorgasburg. And I don't know, when you think about what Smorgasburg started as 15 years ago and sort of what people think of it as in their minds, I don't think people think of it as contributing in that way to the dining scene of a city in the way that sort of being such a big chunk of the 101. And then last year, we were actually included in the 101 as one of the restaurants, even though we're not really a restaurant and only open on Sundays. So that's, I feel like that is, you know, it's sort of indicative of how our work has sort of helped the food culture of LA and sort of permeated everything that happens in the LA food world.
A similar question for you, Phil, is how do you think Shinola has helped to foster growth and economic growth in the cities where you have stores?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the important thing is like, you got to remember that cities are made up of people, right? So anything we can do to directly benefit people in those communities is a benefit, right? So for us, like, our biggest impact is in Detroit, right? Because that's where we manufacture. So we're able to employ people, we're able to teach skilled labor. And like I said, we're the only American watch manufacturer. So we're teaching people skills, right? And for us, it's how do we keep getting better at it, right? So I think when we first started, it took us about 40 days to make one watch. In the last 10 years, we've been able to bring that down to 1 day. So we're innovating in manufacturing, and basically what that does is, you know, the more watches we can make, the more we can sell, the bigger the factory gets, the more people we can employ. So it starts to kind of ripple that way. So I think for us, it's just about, you know, innovating in manufacturing, and, you know, just the more people we can hire, the better for the economy. So
for both of you, I'm always curious, what's the mistake companies can make when they're trying to grow too fast or do too much?
So I think for me, it's like, I see it happen a lot where brands kind of get lost in the sauce. And what I mean by that is they end up just like doubling down on what's working, and they, you know, try to maximize ROI on things that are working, that they're not investing resources into innovating, right? And I think a lot of times when that happens is you notice brands start to kind of look and feel and act the same, right? And I always say that, like, I think a lot of brands right now are trying so hard to be the same kind of different. So I think there's that part that I notice, and I think there's just a general, like, if you don't prioritize innovation and creativity, it's never going to be a forefront for it. It's always going to be an afterthought. So one thing I notice is a lot of brands, who they'll do something that puts them on, right? And they just squeeze that thing in until it's like not unique anymore. So I think that innovation is something that brands need to prioritize more.
I mean, in the food world, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is not being prepared for the grind and how hard it is to make money. It's just such a difficult thing, and it's such a long-term thing that people make decisions based on, what's selling this week or next week, or they make, as opposed to investing and knowing that to build any sort of food business, like you really have to have a multi-year plan. No restaurant opens without sort of, no good restaurant opens without at least like 6 months to a year of runway, because it takes that long. I mean, just like with Smorgasburg, when we first opened, yes, we got a ton of press. We had 10,000 people the first week, but then the second week we had 6,000 people, and the third week we had 5,000 people, and the fourth, and then you hit this sort of bottom, and then you just have to build from there, and it takes time. Like it takes time.
I guess I'll chime in from my end as well. As an editor, I go to so many events, especially like fashion events, where a brand has spent so much money on Fashion Week for this fashion show, and they have a big launch, ton of press, but they don't think about what they're going to do after the show. So they're not thinking about how they're going to get their products into stores, or how they're going to do D2C, or any of that stuff. And I never see those brands again. Like I go to Fashion Week every year, and I always see brands that you don't see again the next season because they've never thought of the vision for the brand. They focus too much on one event and one launch, and that's it.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we try to get better at, because we're becoming so much more of a lifestyle brand now, where we have new products dropping all the time, and we'll make a big moment when a new watch drops, but then we don't bring it back up. Like we don't talk about it 2 weeks later. So that's something that we're definitely trying to get better at. But you make a good point. Like you have to be consistent with how you show up and where you put your effort.
What's like a piece of advice or a motto that you guys carry with you when it comes to, day-to-day work?
So I just personally, I live by the motto, closed mouth don't eat. It's kind of funny that we're here. But for me, it's, I've always kind of been like an underdog. I was never, the smartest kid. I was, but I was always the one who was going to work the hardest. And I think a lot of that is just, having immigrant parents. But what I find that like people who don't ask for things don't get them. So I always live by the motto, closed mouth don't eat. It's like, if you want something, you have to go get it. You have to ask, you have to open your mouth. Right. So that's something that like, a lot of the partnerships that we do with creators and brands is me literally just sending a DM. Like when we started the movement, I literally DM'd Tim Robinson. At the time, I Think You Should Leave just came out. He had the biggest show on Netflix. I just said him, I was like, hey, we have an idea. And he responded. And we were able to get him for the show. And like, to me, it's like those things don't happen unless you open your mouth. So that's something that I live by personally.
Can you help me come up with a personal motto? I need a marketing guy. Are you available?
I mean, that's a good one. That's a good one to borrow for Smorgasburg too. We'll give you some time with this, and we have some audience questions, so you have some time. An audience question that we have for Zach is, what are some emerging trends that you're seeing in food culture? We've seen night markets, food halls, ghost kitchens.
Oh yeah, night markets. What a new trend. Those have never existed before now in every Asian country in the world. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, trends, Smorgasburg, I think when Smorgasburg first started initially, especially before it came to Los Angeles, I think that obviously the whole idea of like, hitting trends in food, and we certainly have had our share of like trend things that sort of incubated or started at Smorgasburg, whether it was like ramen burger or raindrop cake or all these great things. But I think, part of the reason why LA has been so successful in helping to grow Smorgasburg outside of New York, which has, what up until we opened LA proved to be difficult. I think part of the reason is that we tried to focus less on the trends and more in what was going on in the community, which I guess ends up becoming the trend, right? And so sort of just being invested in what's going on in LA, what's going on in LA food, what kind of places are opening, you know, and having it be organic, like having it grow out of the community. We have such amazing communities in Southern California. Like it's such a vibrant food community that, you know, we meet with every vendor before they get, you know, vendors have to apply to be at Smorgasburg. We meet with every one of them and try their food before we have it's very difficult to get in. And part of the reason why we meet with everybody is to hear people's stories, to, you know, to understand where they came from, where the idea came from. And no one at Smorgasburg was just like, oh, like I saw this as a trend and thought it would be cool or whatever. Like that's not, you know, that's not what makes a successful, you know, what makes a place like Smorgasburg. Now, in the short term, it can, you know, social media and whatever, and people will come and they'll eat that raindrop cake once and they'll take that photo and they'll post it on Instagram and it'll get 1 million, you know, views, and then more people will come next week. But the thing is by the 3rd week, the 4th week, the 5th week, like if people aren't coming back a second time, if you don't want to eat something a second time, then it's not going to last. And so like that to me is, you know, is that a trend? Wanting to eat things a second time? Is that?
Well, I think, I don't know if it's a trend, but I think the lesson here is like, you can kind of tie into a trend, but you should also have a long-term goal and a long-term foundation behind it. So you're not tied to the trend. Well, Phil, we have a question for you, which is, you know, how can a brand like Shinola work authentically with a community and work with the community instead of feeling like they're taking over a community?
Yeah, so one thing that I like to do, it's called riding waves, right? So at any given moment within communities, culture, there are either people, organizations, and movements happening that are creating kind of these waves. So for me as the brand, right, it's much more impactful if I, you know, take the resources we have in our platform to contribute to those things already happening, and, you know, making sure that whatever we partner with or collaborate with, they're the story. It's not us, right? We always take a back seat, and a lot of times it's hard for brands to do that, and that's why a lot of them don't. And so for me, it's always about riding these waves that are happening within culture and within communities versus spending the resources and the effort to make our own waves.
You have anything to add to that?
No, don't make me talk after him about the same thing.
Yeah, no.
We've learned that doesn't end well for me.
Our last question from the audience is for both of you. I'll let you start first then, Zach. What is a dream partnership for you that you would love, someone you'd love to work with, or a partner that you'd love to collaborate with?
Jesus, man, this did you come up with this?
Do you want me to go?
Audience question.
No, it's hard.
Someone here is asking that question.
A dream collab. I don't know. You got one?
I got a couple.
Go. You're good.
So I'm a big fan of ALD. I'm wearing one of their things now. They're a brand, streetwear, I guess high fashion streetwear brand out of New York. And I just love their approach to just like storytelling and product. They would be really fun to work with. I know it's also like very just like trendy right now as far as like them and their aesthetic. But also too, I mean, I would be remiss to not say the Hundreds. Just throwing that out there. So maybe we can make that happen.
I feel like there are people here who can make that happen for you. Yeah.
I mean, listen, I want to collab with the Hundreds too. I mean, can I collab with the Hundreds? I want to do that.
3 of us. Let's do something.
Nobody knows it. He's just talking about lunch. We just eat lunch. Yep. No, it's good.
So the Hundreds for both of you? Yeah.
No, I mean, listen, so we, you know, it's funny, like there is such a, you know, there's so many similarities between all the people who are talking today. And when it comes to like placemaking, you know, placemaking and community and build, but there's so many different ways to get to that, you know, and we do tons of collaborations, right? Like we bring in restaurants from other cities, or, you know, from, you know, big name chefs or whoever it is, or we do KCRW tortilla tournament and all these things. But really at its core, like nothing's more compelling than the than the vendors themselves who are at Smorgasburg every single week. And we really like do focus on that. And as vendors graduate, and open brick and mortars or move on from Smorgasburg, we're constantly replacing them with new vendors. And that is actually like the majority of my work. Like that, I feel like is what I focus the most on. And then on top of that, like finding a Saturday location for our vendors to vend, which will make them more sustainable. So, I mean, I don't want to like, collaborate with the city of Long Beach. Like that seems a little bit like, too on the nose, but like that is like, that's, that is the work that like, we're doing and like that I'm trying to do, every day.
Well, that's great. I think we're at time actually, but both of these guys will be hanging out later if you want to grab a bite with them at lunch and ask them more questions. It's been so great having you here. Let's give them a hand one more time.
Thank you so much.